to host this gathering of people who are concerned about the unborn. I'd like to welcome the new Abortion Caravan, which is a group of people who are trying to bring education to the people of Canada in hopes of reforming our laws and our practices with regards to unborn children. I'd like it if each of you who are from the CCBR and the Abortion Caravan, could you please stand and we'll walk. Some of them were out in the hall. I think I've got 20 of them? 25 or so? Yes. Welcome to each one of you too. I was listening to some of your conversations, and it appears that some of you actually went to this school when it was the Crawford School. It's a homecoming for you. And due to demographics, I guess, the city has decided that the school wasn't usable anymore, but we've reclaimed it and using it to educate people in the faith and in righteousness, and so we're happy to do that. Welcome to each of you as well, as you've come to educate yourselves in the issues of life and abortion, and how you might come to understand what's really happening, and how you might be able to articulate what's happening to those who have a different opinion than you, and have a dialogue with them in a civil way to change hearts and minds. We want to be bringing words of life, and we are the watchmen of the country. Listen to these words from Ezekiel chapter 33, beginning at verse 7 and reading through verse 9. Son of man, I have made you a watchman for the house of Israel, or Canada. So hear the word I speak, and give them warning from me. When I say to the wicked, O wicked man, you will surely die, and you do not speak out to dissuade him from his ways, that wicked man will die for his sins, and I will hold you accountable for his blood. But if you do warn the wicked man and turn from his ways, and he does not do so, then he will die for his sins, but you will have saved yourself. It's all to say that we are responsible for each other, to give warning and to give helping hands where there's need, instead of just a pointing finger. And part of this evening is to educate ourselves so that we're able to speak intelligently and lovingly and forthrightly, so that people can change their mind and know what the options are and receive help if they need to walk in right ways. That's our purpose. We don't come to judge, we come to bring life. Our purpose is to do that with humility as servants of the King, not the judges. And we do so with love and an attitude of forgiveness, remembering that Jesus on the cross even said, Father, forgive them. They don't even know what they're doing. So that's our job, to educate our nation to what's really happening, to speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. That's why we're here. Let's ask God to bless us. Father God, we pray that you would fill us with compassion for the children you knit together in their wombs of their mothers, and for the mothers, and for the fathers. Give us an understanding of what is happening with gestation and with abortion. Give us courage to spread your truth with discernment, patience and long-suffering, and compassion. And give us joy and satisfaction as we proclaim life in your name. And it is in the name of Jesus that we pray. Amen. Amen. I don't know who I'm introducing actually. Oh, Ruth. As the MC for tonight, give her a warm welcome.
So first, I'd like to please ask everyone to turn off any electronics that they have, so as not to cause any disturbance. To sing our anthem, summer, and she has a background in theater and a background in music, and she has a great voice. So please join me in welcoming up Lauren Kafuk.
And please sing along.
So I'd like to introduce to you now the team of the New Abortion Caravan. These are some young men and women who I have the privilege of knowing who have given up their summers and given up a large, even their reputations at times, and some put themselves at risk so that they can proclaim the humanity of being born to whoever.
And I'm originally from Powell River, British Columbia. I was doing choice training in Vancouver when a man came up to me and I asked him, "What do you think about abortion?" And he immediately got very irate. And he said, "Nobody has the right to kill another human being." And we ended up speaking for quite a while, and he ended up telling me that his girlfriend had aborted his first child. And he was very heartbroken by that. And I gave him a silent no awareness card, and I told him there are other people out there like you, you're not alone, and there is hope and help and healing. And tears welled up in his eyes as he looked back at me and said, "You're the first person who's ever told me that."
Hi, my name is Cameron Wilson. I'm from Golden, BC. And I was doing one of our genocide awareness projects one time, and a gentleman approached me who identified himself as a human rights professor. He said abortion was a woman's right, but after an hour of discussion looking at the images, he said abortion was actually a human rights violation.
Thank you. My name is Amber Miller. I'm 19 years old, and I'm from Burlington, Ontario. I was doing choice training in Vancouver when a woman came up to me and she said, "You know what? I disagree with abortion, but what about if a woman doesn't have a choice and is raped?" And I asked her if the circumstances surrounding a pregnancy changed what the fetus was. And after looking at the picture of the aborted fetus on my sign, she said, "I guess not."
My name is Deborah Gilman. I'm from Ottawa, Ontario, and I'm 21 years old. Today in Thunder Bay, I was doing choice training, and I asked a young man who was walking by what he thought about abortion, and he said, "I'm completely pro-choice," and we talked for a little bit, and he was saying, "Oh, everything, all the pro-life argument, the pro-life position is absolutely ridiculous, it makes no sense," and we continued to talk, and I was asking him different questions about human beings and what makes us a person, and finally at the end he just said, "You're right."
My name is Siobhan O'Kane. I'm from Castleton, Ontario, and I'm 19 years old. I was doing choice training in BC, and I talked to a woman who was very pro-abortion, but she also told me that I was the very first person to ever show her the abortion images. And after about a 10-15 minute conversation, she finally said, "You know what, you're right, abortion is wrong."
I'm Lana Gomez. I'm from Kelowna, BC, and I'm 23 years old. 6 weeks ago, my husband and I attended the first birthday party of a little boy named Adrian. And we met Adrian when his mom was about 6 months pregnant. And we became friends because she told my husband that she had canceled her abortion appointment because she saw young people standing in the rain holding pictures children who've been killed by abortion. And she didn't know that those people were us and our colleagues at CCBR.
Hi, my name is Dan Slaney. I'm 22 years old, and I was born and raised here in Thunder Bay. And after attending a CCBR presentation at Lakehead University, I received a DVD with graphic abortion images on it. And I brought it home and left it on the dining room table. And my family put in the DVD player and watched it, not really knowing what it was. And they all became pro-life after that. But the best part of the story is that shortly after that, my sister decided to choose life for my niece.
When I was pregnant with him too, but just a few days ago, I guess we were in Regina, and I spoke with a young woman who said she would never have an abortion and considered herself pro-life, but she thought that was just a personal preference. It was not something that you needed to share with other people. And so she also didn't think that she should impose that upon her friend who has an abortion planned for this week. So I pointed to my son Elliot and I said, if you knew that I was going to kill him next week, even if it was because I'm in a really difficult situation, do you think you have the responsibility to do something about it? And she said, of course, that would be terrible. And then I pointed to a picture of an aborted baby and I said, do you think that you have responsibility for your friend's child who is going to look like that if you don't do anything? And all of a sudden she realized that she had a responsibility too, and she asked for resources and she got my contact information, and she's now going to talk to her friend and try and save the baby's life.
Good evening, my name is Cameron Cote. I'm 22 years old from Victoria, British Columbia. And just 2 days ago, while I was doing choice change in Winnipeg, I talked to a University age girl and asked her what she thought about abortion. And she said, just for a little bit, and she said, you know what? Honestly, I've never thought about it before. And so I asked her, well, if you knew this was happening 100,000 times every year in Canada, do you think you should think about it? And then we proceeded to talk for quite a while about abortion, why it was happening, and the injustice of it. And she walked away saying, thank you for opening my eyes to this injustice.
Hi, I'm Anya, and I'm 26 years old. I'm from Edmonton, Alberta. I was volunteering with a graphic display, and I spoke to a girl, and after a long conversation, she said that, okay, yes, the unborn are human beings. However, she still thought that they were not persons. So what I said to her is that whenever throughout history, anyone has separated personhood from any group of human beings, great atrocities have happened. And I pointed to the images that we had of the Cambodian genocide and the genocide of Wounded Knee and the Holocaust. And after she stared at them for a few minutes, she looked back at me and she said, I will never again separate personhood from being a human being.
Hello, I'm Nicholas, and I'm from Oakville, and I'm 24. And when I was doing choice change in Edmonton,
while doing a young man about my age came up to me really angry and mad for showing these graphic images and what we're doing here. And then I gave him a pamphlet, talked to him for a bit, looked at it, sat down, and he came back to me, asked me more questions, then sat down again. Talked to some other people. At the end of the day, he came back to me and said, thank you so much for being here. My mind has changed.
In fact, last year, at the University of Western Ontario's Medical School, Stephanie debated infamous late-term abortionist Dr. Fraser Fellows. Stephanie holds a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from UBC and a certificate with Distinct Canada, as well as in the United States. Jonathon holds a Bachelor of Arts in History from Simon Fraser University. So please join me in welcoming up Jonathon Van Maren.
Abortion, how we will end the killing in our lifetime. Now I realize that may sound to many be a very, very tall claim to make. A lot of you have probably been involved in pro-life groups. You know the extent of the problem. Your pastor said some words earlier that indicated that you guys are very involved in the pro-life movement and therefore have some grasp of what we're looking at. So how do we, a group from Calgary and now also Ontario, claim to have a plan that we can end abortion within our lifetimes? Now I think that you got a sense of that just a little bit earlier when you saw a huge group of young people each and every one of which had their own testimony of how they changed the minds of their peers using a very simple set of arguments. And I've had the pleasure of going through the testimonies on our tour so far and getting them ready to put up on the internet for everybody to read. And I can tell you, there are dozens of more stories just like that, hearts and minds that are being changed. And when you look at the problem of abortion, and you look then at history, we come to realize that throughout history, whenever there are great injustices, youth movements rise up to combat these injustices and to set things straight. Even the Toronto Star, Canada's biggest and most liberal newspaper, had to run a front-page story where Joyce Arthur of the Abortion Rights Coalition of Canada had to admit that before it was just older people outside clinics and older people protesting. Now, she said, it's all young people, including those that you just saw up at the front of the stage. William Wilberforce was 28 years old when he decided to take on the slave trade. Lewis Hine was 32 years old when he decided to take on the practices of child labor. And university students, white and black alike, were the lifeblood of the civil rights movement, taking on segregation and the injustices of Jim Crow in the 1950s and 60s. And today, on the new abortion caravan, a new youth movement is rising up to combat Canada's greatest injustice, and that is the injustice of abortion. Since 1969, over 3 million preborn children have been decapitated, dismembered, and disemboweled. 100,000 preborn children are killed every single year in our country. 266 of them died today. When we look at these numbers, we realize that something has to change. Abortion has to be fought, and abortion has to be ended. Because since 1988, Canada has taken its place alongside countries like China and North Korea as the only nation that has no restrictions on abortion whatsoever. Abortion is legal in Canada from conception up until birth, for any reason or for no reason at all. In Canada, you can get an abortion just because your preborn child is a girl and you don't want a girl. In Canada, you can get an abortion just because you found out that your preborn children might have Down syndrome and you don't want to have a disabled child in your life. In Canada, you can have an abortion just because you want to go on vacation to Hawaii and a pregnancy isn't convenient right now. And that's not a hypothetical example. That actually happened. And as if to complete this hellish picture, several months ago in Alberta, a judge gave a woman a suspended sentence for strangling her baby boy and throwing his body over the fence. And she used Canada's acceptance of the abortion status quo I just described to you to justify her decision. She did, however, give the woman 2 weeks in jail for improper disposal of a human corpse. That is what we are looking at right now in our country. And keep this in mind as well. Every single one of these preborn children that are suctioned apart in abortion clinics are paid for by the tax dollars of me and the tax dollars of you. Each and every one of us has blood on our hands by very virtue of being a tax-paying Canadian. And that is something that has to stop. Now, just for a moment, I want to show you a video of what abortion looks like. I want to show you the faces of Canada's invisible children that have been ignored for so long and that we, as a Christian community, have failed for so long. Now, I recognize that to some of you, and many people that I've met, graphic images may be a bit uncomfortable to look at. We often hear things like, well, how will post-abortive women react if we show them a video of what abortion looks like? And I used to have all of those concerns myself. And then Stephanie Gray and Jojo Ruba invited me to attend a campus exhibit where we used graphic images to reach out to students. So I went through an hour-long training course where we learned apologetics and we learned the philosophy of personhood, and I got a stack of pamphlets, and I headed out to the campus with a group of people, and one of the first girls to walk by, I stuck my hand out with a pamphlet and said, "What do you think about abortion now?" And she was about 21 years old, and she stopped and she turned and she looked at my picture, And then she started to cry. And she said, well, I had an abortion 3 weeks ago. And suddenly, I didn't know what to say anymore, because I had been taught how to explain to her that her baby was a human, but it was too late for that. I had been instructed on how to tell her that her baby was a person, but it was too late for that. And I began to feel very, very self-conscious about what I was standing in front of, and I asked her, well, what do you think of these images? And then her tears became mixed with anger. And she said, nobody told me. Nobody told me what abortion did, and nobody told me that that's what it looks like. And my baby had to pay for that with her life. And that's when I realized that her sin of commission was my sin of omission. Because in a country filled with Christians and filled with pro-lifers, the only person who had been willing to talk to this girl about abortion was a liar at an abortion clinic who took her money and killed her baby. It was then that I realized that it is not a tragedy for a woman to see a graphic image of abortion. It's only a tragedy when they don't see that image on time. I'd now like to show you this brief video. Debated an abortionist at the University of Western Ontario last year. She asked him, how like you do abortions? And he said, 23 weeks and 6 days. Exactly 1 day shy of that last picture you just saw. So now I painted for you a pretty nihilistic picture of what the situation is in Canada. I've shared with you how over 100,000 babies are being killed every single year, and how we are paying for that. So how do I propose to say that we can beat this injustice, that we can eradicate abortion, and that we can eradicate abortion in our lifetimes? Well, the reason I can say that, and I can say that to you tonight with confidence, is because we at CCBR examine history. Now, one of our prime ministers, John G. Diefenbaker, once said, those who do not know their history cannot understand the present and can certainly do nothing for the future. At CCBR, we studied our history, and what we have found is that throughout history, great injustices have been faced, and great injustices have been conquered. What we often forget when we look at things like abortion is that there have been evils, societal evils, that have been just as entrenched. And yet, groups of people, using the right strategies, using the right tactics, were able to defeat those evils. The first man I'd like to talk about with you tonight is the man I mentioned at the very beginning of my presentation, William Wilberforce. When William Wilberforce was 28 years old, he was invited to a meeting by Thomas Clarkson. Thomas Clarkson wanted him to meet with a group of young social reformers who had a very daring plan, and they wanted William Wilberforce to help them with it. And that plan was ending the slave trade in Great Britain. William Wilberforce sat down, heard them out, and decided to dedicate his life to ridding Great Britain of this injustice. The year was 1787, and in 1807, the Slave Trade Act finally passed the British Parliament. And some of you are probably doing the math in your heads and saying, well, that's 2 decades, that's 20 years. Why did it take Wilberforce and his group, which they called the Society for Effecting the Abolition of the Slave Trade, so long to get rid of the slave trade? The reason for that is very simple. If groups of people could just sit down, decide something was unjust, decide that something needed to go, and it was gone, we could get rid of abortion tonight, right here in this room. But we all recognize that in order for abortion to be made illegal, the politicians have to be forced to legislate out of existence. Public policy is dictated by public opinion. Politicians only respond to grassroots force. William Wilberforce realized that as well. And so what did he do? Well, the Society for Effecting the Abolition of the Slave Trade began distributing hundreds and hundreds of images everywhere, showing what the slaves looked like, humanizing the victims, alerting the public, am I not a man and a brother? And as the public saw these pictures, they realized that their lifestyle was being bought and paid for by the blood of slaves. They realized that these slaves were also human beings, and that the slave trade did them a great injustice. And public opinion rapidly began to shift towards antipathy towards the slave trade. But what historians say was the most powerful image in swaying the British public against the slave trade was this image that they released in 1788. This was a picture of the slave ship Brooks, and it showed slaves packed into the hold like cargo. When the British people saw what the slave trade did to other human beings, they were appalled. This poster was hung in restaurants, it was hung in pubs, it was hung on lampposts, it was hung inside homes. What the Society for Effecting the Abolition of the Slave Trade did was make the injustice of slavery impossible to ignore. And in 1807, 20 years after William Wilberforce decided to take down the slave trade in Great Britain, it was done. Now, moving on into the 20th century in the United States, there were quite a few great injustices that were overtaking America at that time. One of the greatest injustices was the practices of child labor. Now, at that time, child labor practices had children working in factories, street trades, agricultural industries, and coal mines for starvation wages and excruciatingly long hours. These children were being robbed of their health, robbed of an education, and often robbed of their lives, sucked into the machinery, and crushed to death. So in the year 1908, a group called the National Child Labor Committee formed and decided that something had to be done about this status quo. But when deciding how to get legislation passed restricting and banning child labor practices, what did they do? Well, they turned to tactics that had succeeded before. They turned to the tactics of the Society for Effecting the Abolition of the Slave Trade. And they hired a photographer named Lewis Hine to go about the country and photograph the victims of child labor wherever he found them. Lewis Hine often had to sneak into the factories, disguising himself as a repairman, because the factory owners didn't want Lewis Hine exposing what was going on. They didn't want Lewis Hine exposing to the American people just how they were getting their goods so cheap. And he continued to do this for some time. And these images were splashed across the front pages of newspapers, inside magazines, and the victims of child labor soon became impossible to ignore. People began to get sick of Lewis Hine's pictures. They said, why do you always have to show us these victims? Why do we always have to see pictures of child labor victims? And Lewis Hine responded to them by saying this: perhaps you are sick of child labor pictures. Well, so are the rest of us. But we propose to make you and the whole country so sick of these pictures that when the time for action comes, child labor pictures will be a record of the past. And standing here today looking back, we know that these child labor pictures are a record of the past. And they are a record of the past by very virtue of their existence. And 12 years after Lewis Hine began splashing his pictures of child labor victims across America's newspapers, the child labor practices were legislated almost into non-existence by the U.S. Congress. 12 years after this campaign started. Now, moving on into the 1950s, America had not yet rid itself of great injustices. What was happening in the United States at that time is something many of you are probably familiar with from history class, and that is segregation and the racist Jim Crow laws. What these laws did essentially were reduce African Americans to second-class citizens. They couldn't sit in the same movie theaters. They couldn't shop at the same stores. They couldn't eat in the same restaurants. And if they disobeyed the status quo, they were shot, hung, burned, or had crosses burned in their front yard. Right in the middle of this, in 1955, a 14-year-old boy named Emmett Till went to visit his relatives in Mississippi. Now, Emmett Till was from Chicago, and Chicago was a northern city. The northern cities did not have as much racism, as much segregation, as many Jim Crow laws as they did down south. So Emmett Till was very likely not quite aware of just how bad it was for his African American brothers and sisters in Mississippi. So while he was there, he was bragging to his cousins, as 14-year-old boys will do. He had a white girlfriend, he had lots of white friends. His cousins didn't believe a word of it, of course. So, perhaps to prove that he wasn't lying, on a dare, he whistled at a white woman as he left the store. His cousins immediately told him that he was in trouble. You didn't do that in Mississippi. And several nights later, they came for him at his uncle's house in the middle of the night. White racists abducted him at gunpoint, and he was found several weeks later on the bottom of the Tallahatchie River, his body wired to the fan of a 75-pound cotton gin. Now, when the Mississippi authorities saw Emmett Till's corpse and realized what had happened, they realized immediately that they had to hide this injustice. They realized they could not let America know what the Jim Crow laws were inflicting upon even young boys. So they put Emmett Till's body in a coffin, they shut it, they sealed it, and they shipped it back to Chicago in the care of Sheriff Stryker. But when the coffin arrived in Chicago, Mamie Till, Emmett Till's mother, refused to be part of the cover-up. She said, "Open the coffin, or I'm going to open it myself." And when the coffin was opened, she saw what they had done to her boy. His nose looked like someone had taken a meat cleaver to it. One eyeball was laying halfway down his cheek, and he'd been shot through the head. What did Mamie Till do when she saw what they had done to Emmett Till? She said, "Let the people see what I have seen." She organized an open casket funeral in Chicago. 50,000 people came to this funeral, bringing their children with them so their children could see what segregation had done to a 14-year-old boy. Jet magazine ran a photograph of Emmett Till's battered face, and Americans realized that this injustice could not be ignored any longer. And exactly 100 days after Jet magazine ran a photo of Emmett Till's battered face, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on the bus, citing the picture of Emmett Till's murdered corpse as the reason she could no longer remain passive. And exactly 10 years later, in 1965, both houses of U.S. Congress approved the Civil Rights Act, firmly making segregation illegal at last. 10 years from the photo of a murdered boy to segregation being illegal across the U.S. Now, how did this happen? How did three movements, in a matter of 1 to 2 decades, make great injustices illegal? They used the right tactics. They confronted the culture, they exposed the injustice, and they accepted the resulting persecution. Because as American pro-life leader Greg Cunningham has said, injustice that remains invisible inevitably becomes tolerable. But the converse of that statement, history tells us, is also true. Injustice that becomes visible inevitably becomes intolerable. And I want to repeat that one more time. Injustice that becomes visible inevitably becomes intolerable. That is how we will end the killing of our pre-born brothers and sisters in Canada in our lifetime. Thank you for listening.
and then 10 years. In a matter of 1 to 2 decades, great social movements managed to rise up to not only fight an injustice in their midst, but end an injustice in their midst. Now I'd like to mention another time period to you. 18 years. 18 years is the time we at the Canadian Centre for Bio-ethnical Reform have given ourselves and the pro-life movement to end the killing of preborn children. Because we exist not merely to fight abortion, but to end abortion. And so this new abortion caravan, which has just come through Thunder Bay, as we make our way to Ottawa from Vancouver, this new abortion caravan is the beginning of the end of abortion in Canada. Your presence here tonight involves you being at a historic event, because I am convinced that in 18 years' time, some of you will be sitting with your children, and others of you will be sitting with your grandchildren, and you will say, I remember the day the new abortion caravan came through Thunder Bay. I remember the pictures driving around our town, the young people holding the signs, the young people going to people's homes and distributing postcards. I remember that day, and now we're celebrating the fruits of it, which is protection for preborn children. However, we're not there yet. That is the goal, that is the vision. But before I talk about how we're going to get there, and the specifics of what we do, I want to talk about another social reform movement. A movement that also managed to transform its culture within its lifetime, and incidentally within 18 years. And the social reform movement that I want to highlight for you this evening involved a movement of individuals that identified themselves as furious women. And these furious women were a part of Canada's abortion rights movement. And in 1970, these furious women stood on the steps of the Vancouver courthouse, now the Vancouver Art Gallery, and they stood on the steps in the spring of 1970 to launch their cross-country tour called the Abortion Caravan. And these furious women had 2 goals in mind: repeal the abortion laws and obtain free abortion on demand. Repeal the abortion laws and obtain free abortion on demand. 18 years later, they got what they wanted. When our Supreme Court of Canada in 1988 threw out the 1969 abortion law in its infamous Morgentaler decision, and as a result of that, there were no protections left for preborn children. And the government has yet to step forward to legislate on this issue in a way which would protect the preborn. And so, as Jonathon has mentioned, the preborn may be killed at any point in pregnancy, for any reason or no reason, and it's paid for with our tax dollars. How did we get there? We got there because these furious women took a lesson from the history books. A lesson from the history books which Jonathon conveyed to you only moments ago. And that lesson was that if you wish to change the culture, you must engage the culture. If you wish to change the culture, you must engage the culture. And engage, these women did. They took their cross-country tour all the way to Ottawa. Every town that they went to, they used vivid and compelling messaging. Taking another lesson from the history books, that when you engage the culture, you must do so in a way which compels people to pay attention to your message, and not only influences how people think, but influences how people feel. And the kinds of messaging that were vivid and compelling that these women used involved an emotional appeal involving women dying from illegal abortions. In fact, the women of the abortion caravan talked about abortion laws killing women. They talked about 12,000 women dying every year. In fact, every town that they went to, they had a coffin, this big black coffin that they traveled with on one of their vehicles. And within that coffin were the instruments of illegal abortions, things like woman has an abortion. So the solution to women dying from illegal abortions is not to change the law, but to address their circumstances, not to exterminate their children, but eliminate the crisis which often prompts a woman to do the unthinkable. In my experience, I have found, even abortion advocates will admit, abortion is not an easy decision for most, if not all, women. That women don't wake up excited the day of their appointment and say, I'm so glad it's my abortion today, it's my rite of passage. People who have abortions don't think that way, because it's not so much that they desire the abortion, but they desire the difficult circumstances that they're in to be eliminated, and it seems like abortion is the means to the end. But we have to ask ourselves, does making abortion legal make a poor woman rich? Does making an abortion legal unrape a rape victim? Does making abortion legal turn a woman's fraud of a boyfriend into a prince? Absolutely not. Legalized abortion does nothing to address a woman's fundamental problems. But tragically, the furious women of the old abortion caravan, the society of the time, never thought it through. And the women persisted across the country, making that emotional appeal, engaging the culture with their vivid and compelling messaging, and they arrived in Ottawa. And when they got to Ottawa, they took their coffin to the home of Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau. They laid it on his lawn, and all the instruments of illegal abortion. Then they went to Parliament when it was in session. They snuck in, they sat down in the seats, chained themselves to the seats, began to create a ruckus, and shut Parliament down for 30 minutes. The furious women even burned Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau in effigy. Every town they went to, when they would give presentations, they would also do on busy street corners dramatizations, plays of illegal abortions. These were bloody, these were graphic. They would put on bloody aprons. They were trying to influence the public, the politicians, and the media, which gave them a wealth of coverage. And as they did all of that, they set the stage. As Frances Wasserly, an abortion advocate, said, they set the stage for an almost 2-decade struggle to advance a woman's right to abortion. And they got what they wanted. But what are we left with now, 42 years later? Today, the wombs of Canadian women have been turned into Canada's killing fields. We are a country which prides itself on peacekeeping, yet we have declared war in the womb, where 1 in 4 preborn children's lives are brutally ended by abortion. And that is why we at the Canadian Centre for Bio-Ethical Reform have said it is time for a new abortion caravan. It is time to redeem the old abortion caravan. It is time to use the sacred cow of Canada's abortion rights movement and use it to advance great good, to bring about a just society instead of an unjust one. And that is why on May 29th, in Vancouver, our team of young people gathered in the very spot that 42 years ago the furious women had gathered. We stood on the steps of the Vancouver Art Gallery to launch our cross-country tour. But instead of being furious women, we call ourselves the survivor generation. Because each one of us is born after 1970, after the wrath of the women of the abortion caravan, where the bloodshed was spread across the country, reaching levels of over 3 million dead. And as we stood on the steps of the Vancouver Art Gallery, we communicated our message in a similar fashion by using vivid and compelling imagery, showing the beauty of preborn children through ultrasound imagery, showing the brutality of abortion through abortion imagery, and witnessing with women from Silent No More Awareness who held signs that said, I regret my abortion. And just as the women of the old caravan changed the culture by engaging the culture, we too, through our cross-country tour, are changing the culture by engaging the culture. The women of the old caravan made their way to Ottawa to end on Mother's Day, to as one of human rights. In fact, we are just 2 days out of being in Winnipeg, where we stood near the Canadian Human Rights Museum in the location where it's being built to demand that that museum let the preborn children in. Because we know that our Charter of Rights and Freedoms declares everyone has a right to life, and that preborn children are being denied that basic charter right to life, making abortion Canada's greatest human rights violation. And so as the women of the old Caravan set across the country, we are setting across the country. And in every town they gave presentations, and in every town we are giving presentations. And in every town they use that vivid and compelling imagery, and in every town we're using that vivid and compelling imagery. Here is some of that imagery. We are driving trucks with 7-foot tall and 20-foot long billboards. This is one example of many images that we have along the sides of our truck. And here we are trying to contrast the beauty with the ugly. And we saw that when Jonathon told the story of Emmett Till. And the image of his brutalized body and smashed-in face is made all the more powerful when contrasted to the beautiful picture of him smiling as a happy 14-year-old boy. In our society, we are attracted to the beautiful and repelled by the ugly. And when it comes to abortion, many people are attracted to abortion. 100,000 women choose that over carrying to term every year in Canada. Why are they attracted to that? Because as our society has framed the abortion debate, they've described it in positive terms that are attractive, things like choice or women's rights or reproductive justice. And so by unmasking choice, by opening the casket on abortion, by exposing the killing, we are creating a situation where people are suddenly repelled by abortion instead of attracted to it, as we rightly should be repelled by that which is ugly. And yet we contrast that ugliness with the beauty of the preborn child, growing so rapidly, so early in pregnancy, nestled in his or her mother's womb. Because we are rightly drawn into and attracted to the beautiful. We also recognize that not only does abortion kill children, but it wounds women. This is a picture of my colleague Nicole, who got pregnant after being sexually assaulted. And she has said she has had a more difficult time healing from her abortion than she has healing from the rape. Why? Because she said, I chose the abortion. We are living in a country where abortion is tax-funded, which many Canadians are unaware of. And yet we will see images of suffering children in other parts of the world. And upon seeing those images, we will be moved with compassion to spend maybe $1 a day to send overseas to help these other children. Yet in our own backyard, our money is being spent not to help children, but to kill children. How can this be? Well, because the victims of abortion in Canada are invisible. They are Canada's invisible children, as Jonathon pointed out. But if the children who are invisible in other parts of the world, once being made visible, and their plight being made visible to us, compelling us to help them, then so too do we believe that making the aborted children and their plight visible, will that compel people to respond. And we're also living in a country where our government mandates that there be warnings on cigarette packages about the dangers for pregnant women to smoke because of the impact that can have on their preborn children. What a contradiction that in this same country, this same government will not mandate that there be warnings about the dangers of abortion through graphic images the way they're often used on cigarette packages. The government is living in a contradictory world where it will warn about one thing, yet support another, when both of those things have the same result of hurting preborn children, but only one of those things has the deadly result of dismembering, decapitating, and disemboweling the child. And so we will go across the country as we have been for almost 3 weeks now, carrying on to Ottawa to confront the culture, exposing the injustice, noticing even the media. As I mentioned, the women of the old abortion caravan generated media attention, and we too have seen huge amounts of media attention directed towards our new abortion caravan. What I'd like to do now is play for you a clip that we received from CBC television in Vancouver when we launched our campaign just a few weeks ago.
The abortion group began a caravan across Canada. 2 trucks covered in graphic images of fetuses are headed to Ottawa. And as Renee Filipponi reports, Donnelly's participation with the group is raising some eyebrows.
He may look familiar to you, but you probably don't recognize him without the usual background. Now the tenor is weighing in on a controversial subject, one most high-profile people shy away from: abortion.
If we can't discuss things rationally, then we're not Canadians. We've got to be able to talk.
He was on the steps of the Vancouver Art Gallery last week to help launch a cross-Canada pro-life caravan. Today, buses with graphic photos of aborted fetuses roll through Kelowna. They are headed to Ottawa for a showdown on Parliament Hill. Donnelly has been singing for the Canucks for more than a decade. The family man has 9 children with his wife, Catherine. Reaction to his position has been mixed. On Twitter, one person writes, "What do the Canucks think of their national anthem singer, associating them with the abortion debate?" And another, "I think it's time for the Vancouver Canucks to get a new anthem singer."
I think that's kind of a topic that should be left alone. I mean, it's more like a choice that other people should be able to make themselves.
He sings. We're musicians, so I kind of relate. I don't think I have any say in that kind of thing.
He's brave. Yeah, he is. I think more people should be doing that.
Donnelly did not agree to an interview today. In a statement, the Canucks say that while they support the rights of people associated with the team to voice their opinions, they add that those opinions don't necessarily reflect those of the organization.
Show me not only what we were doing, but what we were exposing. The images of preborn children, the images of abortion, the images of women regretting their abortion all made it onto the news. And this is why our American director calls our projects force multipliers, to use a military term. The force of the project is not only in those who see it directly, who we can reach in large numbers because of the large outreach the project is designed to have, but also those we reach indirectly as a result of media coverage, covering the controversy, and in doing so exposing abortion to a broader audience than we had originally seen. We realize that the silent screams of aborted children cannot be heard, but their broken bodies can be seen. And that is why we will make those images visible through media coverage, but also through direct contact with people who we encounter on the streets with our messages. You know, abortion rights advocate that Jonathon mentioned, Joyce Arthur, has said she will not even call it what we want it called, it being the new abortion caravan. She says it is a sacrilege. She considers our campaign to be a sacrilege. Why? Because the old abortion caravan was Canada's sacred cow, Canada's abortion rights movement's sacred cow. They managed to achieve cultural transformation because of this catalyst, this graphic campaign moving its way across the country, challenging the public, challenging the media, challenging the politicians. And we have taken it, and we are moving across the country to challenge the public, to challenge the media, and to challenge the politicians. Now what I'd like to do is share with you some of the fruits that have come from this kind of outreach. And you heard many of them already when our incredible team stood up before you to share just a testimony each. And I'd like to begin with the testimonies I shared with you about the presentations that we give in high schools. Every time we speak at a high school, we ask students to fill out a survey on a scale of 0 to 10, ranking what their position was on abortion before and after the presentation. 0 meaning support, shift towards the pro-life perspective. Now let's look at the ones we're really targeting, the fence-sitters, the individuals who are in the mushy middle. They may support some abortion, but they oppose other abortions. We have seen a whopping 77% of these people shift towards the pro-life perspective as a result of encountering our message, which is not only verbal, but also visual. Because in every presentation, we play a video exposing what abortion has done to preborn children. And then there's the last group of people, the individuals who fit into the 8 to 9 category. They're almost there, but not quite yet. And we have seen a whopping 84% of them move closer to that fully pro-life perspective as a result of hearing our message and seeing our message. Not only do we get quantitative results, but also qualitative results. Several years ago, I spoke at a high school in the Greater Toronto area, and I received an email from the guidance counselor in the months following my talk, and he said to me, "Stephanie, I just wanted to tell you that in the past 6 or 7 weeks, a student has come to my office informing me that she's pregnant. I asked her what her plans were. She said she was going to carry to term." He said after I congratulated her on her pro-life convictions, I asked her what, if anything, had influenced her to that decision. He said she cited your presentation as helping her understand who her preborn child is, convicting her that she could never harm that child. After I responded and thanked him for sharing such encouraging news, he responded back and said, "What I forgot to tell you is that was the second girl to come to my office in the past few weeks, informing me of an unplanned pregnancy. Both of them cited your presentation as convincing them not to harm their children. And that Christmas, 2 babies were born." Not only have we seen good fruits as a result of presentations where the pictures and the message is communicated, but also through the outreach that we taught to you, or that we mentioned we were doing today in Thunder Bay, with the trucks circling town. And in every presentation or at every town that we go to, we typically find people respond by calling our voicemail. As you can see, there's a phone number on each truck, and when they call that number, they get about a 2-minute answering machine message, where we briefly explain why we're exposing injustice in this manner, then inviting the caller to leave a voicemail, and they'll get a call back if they request to have a call back. So just by pressing the little sound button there, I'm going to play for you one of the responses. Oops, just get that. And just that, yeah, there we go. Just 1 second. Thank you. Oh, okay. We're going to hear a response. University of Thunder Bay. Is Amanda here tonight? There she is. Amanda was witnessing on the streets with her fellow interns last summer with Choice Chain, what we are also doing today in Thunder Bay with the handheld signs of abortion imagery. And Amanda saw a woman come past her pushing a baby stroller, and so she said to the woman, "What do you think about abortion?" And the woman looked down at the baby and up at Amanda and said, "Well, what do you think I think?" And Amanda said, "Well, I'm going to go with your pro-life." And the woman said, "Yeah, funny story." She said, "When I was pregnant, and I wasn't sure what to do with this pregnancy, I was stuck in traffic one day, and I looked out my window, and this truck drove past with a picture of an aborted baby the same age that I was pregnant. And I looked at that picture and I thought, I can't do that to my child." And there in front of Amanda was a 15-month-old, blonde-haired, blue-eyed little girl who was living because her mother encountered an image of a child who had been killed. So we know that these projects not only change minds in the case of the phone call, but save lives in the case of the woman that Amanda encountered. We also have found through our exhibits that we do on university campuses and elsewhere, people change their minds. What we're going to do now is play for you a video of a testimony of a student named Julie that we encountered this past February on a university campus when we did our Genocide Awareness Project, comparing abortion to historical atrocities. This student saw us in February for the second time. The first time she saw us was 3 years prior. And after she told us her story about her thoughts of the exhibit, we decided
you know, these pictures, and I thought it was disgusting. But it followed me home, and it followed me for several days, and I went online and looked up a video of an entire abortion, and I cried until I couldn't breathe, and I changed. I changed at that moment from pro-choice to pro-life, and I know that it was because I saw these pictures, and I think what people do, why people get so upset, is because when you see a baby in pieces like that, you can't help but feel some kind of bad feeling. You feel angry or sad or disgusted or scared or guilty. You can't escape the truth, and these pictures show the truth. There's nothing you can argue with that. So I totally support what you guys are doing. It changed my life, it changed the way I think.
That is the power of a visual message. Once a picture is in our minds, it is very difficult to get that picture out. And the more we try to push it out, the more it often comes back up. What's interesting about Julie's story, she talks about when she saw us 3 years ago, she was angry. She was mad. And we have to realize that in order to transform the culture, it's going to require challenging the culture. It will require growth. It will require being uncomfortable. And that often results in resistance, as Julie herself experienced. And that reminds me of a quote by Arthur Schopenhauer, who said, "All truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as being self-evident." There are a lot of people who want us to get the culture to a point where the pro-life message is accepted as being self-evident without going through steps 1 and 2. But my experience has been that we likely have to go through the period of ridicule and the period of violent attack before we get to that situation where that truth is accepted as being self-evident. To move the culture of death to a culture of life, as I say, requires challenging the culture. And when we challenge the culture and we face resistance back, we face that ridicule or we face that violent persecution, we face that opposition, there are some who in the face of that will instantly conclude they're doing something right. They'll wear it as a badge of honor. There are others who in the face of resistance and persecution and opposition will instantly conclude they're doing something wrong and they'll cease their behavior. And I would say you can't come to either conclusion until you first ask yourself a question. Why? Why am I persecuted? Why am I resisted? Why don't people like me? Why are they being mean to me? And the answer to the question why will determine whether we should carry on or cease our behavior. If upon answering the question, why am I persecuted, it is because you're doing something wrong, because you're being mean, because you're being un-Christ-like, then yes, you need to change your behavior. Similar to the riots in Vancouver, were the people rioting, maybe being attacked by police? Yes. Why? Because they were doing something wrong. So they needed to change their behavior. But if the answer to the question, why am I being resisted, and why am I being persecuted, is that you're communicating an inconvenient truth. That you're communicating a message which convicts the hearts of people because it challenges them and reminds them that maybe they have some sin or guilt in their past that they have yet to come to terms with, then we need to persist in communicating that message. Much like the civil rights activists in the movement Jonathon talked about in the 50s and 60s, who very peacefully resisted the Jim Crow laws, the racism and segregation, and they experienced persecution. They experienced drinks being thrown on their heads, eggs cracked on them, people beating them up. Why was it correct for them to persist in the face of that opposition? because they were communicating a message of truth, a message of justice. They were being peaceful, they were being civil. And so it is with the pro-life movement. This is a picture of one of our team members, Siobhan, who just hours ago had a large container of chocolate milk dumped on her from behind, along with Anna, one of our other team members, and Linda, one of our local volunteers, and Francisco, our grab team leader, as they stood witnessing, showing the broken bodies of the children who cannot show it for themselves. In the face of that persecution, we have to say, well, did Siobhan do anything wrong? Was she mean? Was she unkind? No. She quietly stood with an image while a vicious, angry man attacked an innocent woman. And so we persist, no matter the persecution, because we know that the truth will set people free. As we get to the final portion of my presentation, where I talk about where we go from here, what you and I can do together to end the killing in our lifetime, I want to just play for you first a brief video which really summarizes the significance of this new abortion caravan in contrast to the old one. It summarizes the message that we're trying to get across tonight about the need to engage the culture, to change the culture, to use vivid and compelling messaging. The video that I'm going to play for you, I will warn you, has graphic imagery more shocking than the first video Jonathon played for you tonight. But I am going to pray that you watch every single second of the images in this video. And that when you are tempted to close your eyes or look away, that you will keep watching. And I'm going to pray that you keep watching, because as my colleague Greg Cunningham has said, if we can't face this, we can't fight it. And there are a whole lot of people in our churches, in our families, in our workplaces, and in our communities who aren't fighting abortion precisely because they've never been faced with it.
I'm not sure people get it. On May 29, 2012, the new abortion caravan is coming to Vancouver, and I still don't think people get the significance of what this means, or the significance of what the old abortion caravan, the 1970 abortion caravan, actually did to Canada. I was a history student at Simon Fraser University, where a lot of the women who were members of the first caravan went and left from. And I got to hear about it all the time. This glorious caravan that had brought us these new freedoms. The freedoms, it turns out, which led us to the disgusting status quo we have now. Abortion on demand for all 9 months of pregnancy, whether you're a girl, whether you're Down syndrome. It doesn't matter. You can get this baby torn apart, and it's paid for by us. We're the survivor generation now. We look around us and we see 1/4 of our generation laid waste. There's friends we're never going to get to meet. There's brothers and sisters we're never going to get to meet. There's partners we're never going to get to meet. Because the women of the first abortion caravan, who declared themselves furious women, succeeded. And in 1988, all abortion laws were repealed. And we now see the result of their fury. And it's a huge mass grave containing 3 million tiny preborn corpses, and the number keeps climbing. People might say, well, they were just seeking the freedom to choose. They were just fighting for women's rights. Do you really think that? You think they don't know what they were doing? Here, let me read you a letter from the Toronto Daily Star, May 19, 1970. It was published just after the Toronto rally. This was written by a woman named Amy Savelle from Oakville, and here's what she wrote, quote, "Consummate actresses that we are, if we were to keep pushing and screaming, we should succeed in pulling off the most stunning piece of legislation ever, abortion on demand. A stroke of the pen, and absolute power over life and death is ours. What a heady triumph. Why, I can almost taste the glory. Even God will envy us." This was their goal, and this is what they got. If you think for a moment that those who were pushing for abortion on demand didn't know they were killing, didn't know they were pushing for the deaths of babies, as they said themselves, the power over life and death, then you're kidding yourself. And this is why we're doing what we're doing. This is why we're showing what these babies look like on the street. This is why we're showing their shattered bodies, because their shattered bodies give us the last message they are capable of giving, and that is end the killing. We have to end the killing. They try to get abortion completely unrestricted by saying things like, well, guess what? Women are dying in back Well, here we have common ground. We both think it's wrong to kill people with coat hangers. But just because the suction machine might work better, it doesn't make it any more ethical or any more moral. At the end of the day, you're still targeting the body of a baby and tearing it to pieces. And it's time to stop. It's time for us to say no, because way too many have died. We lose 266 every single day that we sit around and we wait. And we talk about the old abortion caravan as if it brought us freedom, when actually all it did was bring us the freedom to kill our own offspring.
You saw just a few bodies of the aborted children, but God sees every single one, before and after dismemberment. The over 3 million which have occurred in our own country, and the 42 million which happen every year throughout the world. We have the power in our churches, across the country, amongst the people who claim the name of Christ, to end the killing in much less than 18 years. But we haven't, and we won't, unless the body of Christ gets on its knees and begs God to break our hearts for what breaks His. And they are not likely to do it unless they're faced with it. And that is why 25 young people are crossing the country to face Canada with its invisible children. But we need your help. We need you to partner with us. When each of you came in, likely on your seats or near where you sat down, there was a pencil and 2 sheets of paper. One was a harder cardstock. If you have one of those cards, please lift it up for a moment so I see how many people even have one. If you don't have the white card, not the pink one, if you don't have the white card, please raise your hand, and some of our team members, Ruth and Francisco and Amber, will bring you a little white card and a pencil. So just keep your hand raised as they grab that information for you. I ask that you please fill that card out tonight, because this is our way of staying in touch with you and your way of staying in touch with us, because we need to work together to end the killing. On this card, you can indicate if you're interested in volunteering with us, in learning how locally you can implement the projects that we did today so they can carry on in our absence, so that you can walk around the streets of Thunder Bay, putting a postcard into everyone's boxes. In fact, in the days following our visit to Jonathon's and my hometown of Chilliwack, we received word from a local activist that they needed their goal to make sure every home in Chilliwack received a postcard by September. Now, Chilliwack is the same size and population as Thunder Bay. So if they can do it in the west, you can do it in the east. And now we have a challenge from 2 ends about who's going to make sure their own community is exposed to the injustice of abortion via a postcard first. But tonight, although I hope you'll want to partner with us through activism, all I ask tonight is that on that card where you have the opportunity to indicate your interest in financial support, that you actually make a donation to us this evening. You can make a donation through credit card. We have credit card forms on the table at the back. But you can also make a donation by writing a check to CCBR. We have our team of 25, 19 of them that are full-time staff. 19 that instead of having other jobs that take time away from doing full-time pro-life work, are devoting full-time hours and more to ending the killing. And so even if you can't do the activism, if you can write a check to fuel the young people we're working with to do that activism, then we will reach our goal of ending the killing in our lifetime. And as you think about supporting us financially, I'd like to tell you about a man by the name of Ed Ratcliffe, a wealthy businessman who was very inspired by a social reformer. So inspired that he kept writing large checks to that social reformer to help him and his campaign in achieving their goals. And Ed Ratcliffe was particularly inspired by the social reformer because of his willingness to put his comfort on the line. This social reformer was getting arrested for what he believed in, and Ed Ratcliffe was inspired by that. And he knew he couldn't do what the social reformer was doing, but he could help him by writing checks. That social reformer was Canada's Dr. Henry Morgentaler, our most infamous abortionist. And as he was working in the 70s and the 80s to have widespread access to abortion, something he achieved, as I mentioned, in 1988 with the infamous Supreme Court decision naming him in that decision, the Morgentaler decision. He was able to do that because people like Ed Ratcliffe were willing to financially fuel Morgentaler's efforts. Ed Ratcliffe said Morgentaler and his friends shouldn't have to constantly be fundraising. Why? Because if Morgentaler invested time into fundraising, he was taking it out of activism. So Ratcliffe said, if I can write the checks to form an organized group of people working flat out and full-time to advance a woman's right to abortion, I'll do it. And the question we're left with is this: are we as determined to save babies as Ed Ratcliffe was to kill them? Are we as determined to save babies as Ed Ratcliffe was to kill them? There are 19 very determined young people who are willing to lay their lives down for children they've never met. And are you willing to write the most sacrificial check possible to fuel our efforts? In closing, I'd like to leave you with a quote from a great social reformer, from a movement Jonathon made reference to. It's the civil rights movement, and their great leader, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And in Dr. King's letter from Birmingham jail, he made a statement about the work that he and his fellow civil rights activists were doing that very much applies to what we as a pro-life movement are doing. And Dr. King said, like a boil that can never be cured so long as it is covered up, but must be open with all its pus-flowing ugliness to the natural medicines of air and light, so too injustice must be exposed, with all the tension its exposure creates, to the light of human conscience and the air of national opinion, before it can be cured. And there's the good news. It can be cured. And when it comes to abortion, I stand before you to declare that it will be cured in our lifetime. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephanie and Jonathon, for your presentation. So we're going to move into a time of questions. Does anyone have any questions for Jonathon and Stephanie? Yes.
How many people were involved in the first caravan, and have you made any efforts to contact them and see what their views are now?
Yes, good question. So how many people were involved in the first caravan, and have we contacted them to see what their views are now? In terms of the core traveling team, it was about 17. So we're happy that we have more than they do in terms of a core team. By the time they got to Ottawa, there were hundreds of people that rallied with them in Ottawa, and we've already seen people join us along the way. And we know that locally, of course, we're also doing that. In terms of contacting them, we haven't contacted them. However, when I was interviewed by CBC Radio in Kelowna, they contacted one Joyce Arthur very offended that we are taking their sacred cow and calling it the new abortion caravan. And so she was on a couple days after me, you know, expressing her disgust and horror.
Muslim community as a whole is against abortion. I was wondering what attempt you made to tap into that group of Canadians for support.
Good question. So the Muslim community on whole generally is very pro-life and against abortion, and have we at all tapped into that community to get support? Not in any significant way yet, but we are a non-sectarian organization focused on human rights, and so we're willing to partner with people who share our vision to end the killing. And there certainly are people of other faiths, Orthodox Jews, Muslims, Sikhs, Hindus. Generally, there are people of other faiths who share the idea that it's wrong to kill preborn children. And so we're hoping, especially as we expand into Toronto, that we can partner with those other people. Yes, go ahead.
You know, we did get some media coverage that we sound very proud of. It was biased. You know, I've been an editor for 20 years. So they showed your truck and all that, but the implication was these people are nuts. I think, you know, it would be wonderful if you could show a video like the one you just showed on a national TV network. That would do it. And I don't know if you've ever looked into that or if it's possible, but that would really change hearts and minds.
So the question was, there was media coverage of what we've been doing so far. It's been very biased, but it would be wonderful for us to get a video like we showed on TV. And I couldn't agree with that more. Joyce Arthur has said more or less what you said, that they're getting a lot of media coverage, but basically it's insinuating that they're crazy, or at the very minimum that our tactics are very offensive. But what she doesn't realize is that for us the medium is the message. So when we're happy that we get media coverage, it's because they just put a picture in a magazine or newspaper or TV station with a circulation we can't get our hands on, and they're putting our pictures directly in it. They're saying, look, these people are against abortion, and in the background, there's a sign showing exactly what abortion looks like. Maybe they're too blind to see that what they're doing is showing the shattered bodies of the children, and they're showing that to all of their viewers. But we look at the media in that sense as a force multiplier. So you can ignore all of us, not call us for comment, completely cut our side of everything out. If you run the pictures, we're still going to be really happy, because that's one of the ways we can get pictures of Canada's abortion victims, which are generally hidden, onto the front pages of newspapers.
Sorry, it is great that you got that coverage, so don't get my question wrong. I'm just wondering, did you look into having that video or something similar to that video broadcasted on a national network?
Yeah, we know we'd never get that video broadcast on a national network, as was the follow-up question, because we have attempted to have even just our website to be advertised, you know, endthekilling.ca without a graphic image, and Advertising Standards Canada thus far has resisted even the advertising of our website name. They've also come after us when our trucks and our postcards have been circulated, thinking they have control over that, but because we control those things, they can't. I would add, however, that I think the overall media coverage we've had has actually been alarmingly positive. CBC didn't blur the images, which is sometimes common for graphic news stories. They also said pro-life and not anti-abortion. They even quoted that woman who said, oh, I think he's very brave, you know? And the only thing that I feel was unfair is that Mark Donnelly had been rushed to the emergency for an emergency of appendectomy, and the interview request they had was 2 days after that. And so he said, look, I'm not feeling well, I can't do the interview. And they say, Mark Donnelly refused an interview. So that was the one part of the story I thought was unfair. But I have to say, even the print media, I've been surprised, has, in my interviews, allowed lengthy quotes from me and taken some of our key talking points and included those in the stories. And we look at the work we do not only as evangelization to the culture, but evangelization to the police and to the media. And I've had reporters talk to me at length, and you can tell they're having a different perception of the pro-life movement because of how we explain things. Go ahead.
Are you aware in Canada the financial side of the abortion industry, so to speak? I read a few months ago an article, I think there was a link on the First Things blog, First Thoughts, with Planned Parenthood. There was a study done how abortion is very much an How is it visible to here?
It's not particularly whenever you've got private clinics opening up, and of course right now in Canada, most of their contracts are with the government, because Canada's government pays for all abortions. But that's the way it's going to work. If you say that killing is legal, and try to make it common, try to promote it as a freedom, somebody's got to make money off of that, and people are going to take advantage of that. In fact, as you point out, they're going to try and make sure the abortion rate goes up, because that gets them a lot more money. People keep on saying things like, Planned Parenthood will say, every child a wanted child, which of course they actually mean every unwanted child, a dead child. But if they actually wanted to make abortion safe, legal, and rare, like they say they do, they wouldn't be so angry every time a pro-lifer points out that abortion has psychological impact on a woman and things like that. They're desperate to hide all of the negative impacts of abortion, and they're desperate to hide everything that could possibly talk a woman out of having an abortion. So no, they don't want it rare at all. They just want it legal and safe for women. Of course, not for the reborn children.
I think it is also helpful, because it's a money-making industry, to make the point to the public, as we are in our trucks, that this is tax-funded, and that doctors are benefiting from it, that they are buying homes and buying cars and going on vacations on the blood of children that they have spilled as a result of the work they've chosen to get into. Yes?
In 1988, the government of the day had a law that they were trying to pass, which would make it illegal to do abortions in the first trimester. And both the pro-abortion and the anti-abortion forces joined together to have that law defeated. Would your organization be happy to see a law like that come into being, even though it would not necessarily be what you would hope for in the end?
Good question. So in terms of the question being, historically in the end of the 80s, early 90s, in 91, there was an attempt to create a law that would have only banned some abortions and didn't satisfy really either side of the abortion debate. Where do we stand on that? Well, we believe that the law should protect all preborn children. But in order to get there, oftentimes you kind of chip away at it, the same way Wilberforce chipped away at it. And so we're, big supporters of the new group WeNeedALaw.ca, which is trying to get a law for total protection of preborn children, but recognizing sometimes we might be able to get smaller laws in the meantime, but all the way towards that ultimate goal. Yes?
What happens to the fetuses?
Good question. What happens to the fetuses?
Generally, they're incinerated. They often have crematoriums right in the abortion clinic, and sometimes they'll just toss them in the trash. There's that Operation Rescue got one of the very first graphic images of aborted babies by just running from the dumpster behind the abortion clinics and finding little babies in pieces in garbage bags. So they're either tossed in the trash or they're cremated.
Are they used for research?
Not generally from abortion clinics, per se. There's the research side of things is more embryonic stem cell research, where they take embryos and they try to experiment with those. There's not a lot of research use in aborted fetus, especially in the first trimester. The suction machines destroy its body so badly it's mangled almost beyond recognition. And the second and third trimester, they generally would incinerate the bodies on the site, or have them taken away in a biohazard truck.
My concern is that in order for Emmett Till and his mother to be significant, Rosa Parks had to refuse to get off the bus or to change seats. I'm wondering, in our culture, where we are more into the electronic age and communication happens over the internet anonymously or at least mediated by electronics rather than face-to-face. Do you see a difference in the cultural demand on the public getting involved and being the Rosa Parks after you? Or do you, and I fear that we will say, oh, you go for it. Oh, you're good. You show more of those pictures. We'll send some money. But we might not be at the lunch counter
Well, you don't, basically what he said was when he looks at the Emmett Till story, he wonders how many people will actually want to be Rosa Parks after seeing that, how many people, if I'm not mistaken, would rather support from the sidelines. Well, when I look at that story, it was a picture of a murdered boy that spurred Rosa Parks to action. When I was in university, the first year of university, and I was coming up against a lot of opposition to all of my Christian views, and I was just Googling things to kind of get a feel for what the arguments for my side was. And I Googled abortion, and the first thing I came up with was a video of an abortion. I watched the whole thing through, and I started talking about it, and I haven't really stopped since then. That's what convicted me. I saw a baby getting torn apart, I couldn't believe this was happening, and then nobody was doing anything about it. The images that we showed you tonight, the images we show in our trucks, create new Rosa Parks all the time. Most of the people who were standing up front here will tell you that a graphic image is what really convicted them to get involved in the first place. And when you say, well some people just want to sit in the sidelines and support us, absolutely. My brother, for example, is a very shy guy. He works in construction, he would never want to be behind a sign. He saw the videos and said, well, I want to do something, can I give $50 a month? Everybody has a role to play in the pro-life movement. Not everybody has the duty to do exactly what we're doing. Everybody has the duty to do something. They have to do whatever they can. And everybody has a duty, I believe, to sacrifice for their preborn neighbors, regardless of what form that sacrifice might take.
And I would just add to that the whole notion of blooming where you're planted. And yes, everyone can sacrifice something, and if they can't be on the front lines with us, we hope it's through a financial donation or both. But everyone is in a position to do some form of action. Anyone who's a physician needs to make sure that they are 100% pro-life and not only influencing their patients properly, but influencing their peers properly. And we have a whole book on the back about how to do that. Anyone who's a pharmacist, anyone who's a nurse, anyone who's a teacher, maybe they won't stand on the sidewalk with the sign, but situations will arise in the workplace by virtue of the job they have. That's their chance to be a Rosa Parks, figuratively speaking. And that's what we need to seize, and what isn't being seized by a lot of people claiming the name of Christ and claiming to be pro-life. We have a question. Okay, go ahead. Just point to who you're pointing to. I can't see the... Go ahead. Okay. Good question. So the picture, the question is about the movie The Silent Scream, which showed with the old ultrasound a child being aborted, and you see the mouth of the child open up. We have intended to use that simply because although it is powerful, and actually maybe we could incorporate it into one of our videos, the image itself, because it's the old ultrasound, it's very black and grainy. So in a still form, I don't think it would be as compelling as the bloody image. However, in the context of a video where you see bloody images, that one segment would actually probably be a powerful complement to our videos. Go ahead.
So, does that mean that our reaction was the silent scream? Is it because the child feels the pain? Do we know if those pieces actually feel the pain or what?
So the question is, do we know that the children actually feel pain? There's a debate as to whether preborn precisely feel pain. I read some studies that say between 9 to 13 and a half weeks, and other studies say not until after 20 weeks does the child feel pain. But I think both pro-life and pro-abortion can agree there's a point where the child does not feel pain very early in pregnancy. And yet our point is that abortion is wrong independent of feeling pain. Because if you were under anesthetic and someone killed you, you wouldn't feel pain, but it would still be wrong that you were killed. So the feeling of pain does not have a bearing on the morality of whether it's right or wrong to end the life of that child. So we'll take 2 more questions, and just because we'll try to go with people who haven't asked a question yet, and then we'll do discussion one-on-one. Yes?
So I have a question in advertising. The advertising is that I've never seen a choice change. However, we do have the stand that we have, the life change. And so I just want to plug that and just say that happens every
do is talk to our activism facilitator, which is Ruth Lobo, who was there earlier. If people want to start up an activism group here in Thunder Bay, she'd love to talk to you. We've got groups that have, this year, started up all the way across. We've got Vancouver against abortion. We've got Valley against abortion. We've got groups, the Abortion Awareness Project in Lethbridge, Ottawa against abortion. So all these different communities who are taking on choice change and these activism groups that are doing things like postcarding and choice change. So if you want to get involved, just talk to Ruth and she'd love to get something set up with you guys.
And again, as you fill out that contact card by giving us all of your contact information, we'll send you a follow-up email with some of the specifics like what Ruth's email address is and different things like that. So we encourage you to do that. And also with all the groups that Jonathon mentioned that are in existence, one of the things that we also like to say is, we don't exist to replicate our name, but rather replicate a winning strategy. And so Jonathon made reference to Lethbridge against abortion. Abortion Awareness Project in Lethbridge, which is actually done through Lethbridge Right to Life. And so we would hope that Thunder Bay Right to Life would also want to take on this project as something that happens through an existing pro-life group. Because if you already are in existence and mobilized, it's just a matter of creating a new project that some people can take part in. There's another question I believe here. You make sure, yes.
So the question is, what is the rationale of those who actually perform abortions for doing abortions? And actually, I was just recently, a pro-life leader in British Columbia, who were in Vancouver, gave me all of his old files on abortion doctors and all these polls they conducted with abortion practitioners to find out why they did what they did. The vast majority of them, over 70% of them, said the reason they do abortions is because they saw a botched abortion. Because they saw an abortion that went wrong, an illegal abortion before 1969, they felt compelled by seeing that gruesome image to do something that they perversely thought would solve the problem. So that was quite a lot of why people went into it in the first place. It's also notable that most abortion practitioners now are quite old, and most of them still remember the time when abortion was illegal. And for the rest of it, for young people, the Toronto Star did an article about 3 years ago talking about how the big abortion movement's biggest problem in Canada is they can't find young people to go into the abortion business because they don't really see it as something they want to do. There's a huge stigma in the medical community attached to doing abortions. So, ironically, considering the strategy that we've been talking about, it was graphic images that got the very first abortion practitioners into the business in the first place.
Yeah, and I can testify to that because the two abortionists that I have debated, both of them cited that they were young student doctors when abortion was illegal, and they saw, indeed, disturbing realities in front of their eyes. So they were moved with a legitimate concern to address a crisis. Tragically, they came up with the wrong solution. And so that's what we need to work on, showing that there's another better solution. So thank you very much. We'll address things one-on-one at the end of the night. Again, if you can leave your contact card in the basket that will be on the table at the back, that would be great. Also, I encourage you to chat with some of our team members who can be identified in the name tags. And lastly, I want to leave you with two questions that John F. Kennedy posed to an audience. If not us, then who? And if not now, then when? Thank you. Thank you so much.